It's a Leo day. I think the moon's moved into Leo by right now. All right. I think it's moved into Leo. And I wonder if I can give my Leo full moon report, which is exact tomorrow at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at 1448 degrees Leo. And I love full moons almost as much as I love Damien. Okay, guys, back inside. Didn't work out outside. It's actually been quite a challenging day, and there could be a lot of background noise. But I really have to get this full moon report out for you guys. I know many people have asked me if I'm going to do it. So actually, I was going to go into this full moon Yod, and it's a great segue because Yods are aspect patterns that if we're born with them or they occur in the sky, there is a level of difficulty or challenge or tension that's inherently built into them because they have this feeling of fatedness to them. In other words, it's like another way it's described, that aspect instead of Yod in astrology is finger of God. So it's like God is pointing at you and saying you are going to get this done this lifetime, not next, not lifetime. It's going to happen. So there's a lot of tension built into a Yod, and the best way I can explain it without going into too much detail is just that with all of the other aspects like squares, conjunctions, oppositions, generally speaking, they have something in common that they can work with in order to resolve the dynamic that's being interplayed between the two archetypal energies. So for example, in a full moon, we have the moon opposite the sun, and the sun is our core identity, our passion. The moon is our emotional body. And when they're exactly opposite each other, they're working two sides of the same coin, but they often have to dialogue with each other in order to come to an understanding in the middle point that integrates the two polar opposite points of view. So, for example, this full moon, we have the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Leo. And what do they have in common? The fixed signs. So both Aquarius and Leo are fixed signs. So you could have the commonality might be the modality, like cardinal, fixed, or mutable, or the element. They could both be earth, like in a trine. It's two earths or two fires. So there's always something in common, but within a Yod, you're dealing with two 150-degree angles, which is called an inconjunct. And you're dealing with a planet that's inconjunct two other planets at 150 degrees on either side. And the point of the planet that's the focal point has nothing in common with either of the other two sides of the inconjunct. You know, they don't share an element, they don't share modality. And it's so like, how do we make this work? You know, what do we have in common to work with? It's like, I just don't get you at all. At all. And then and yet it requires resolution because you're born with a dynamic interplay that requires at some point some attention. But when that attention comes, the breakthroughs are huge, maybe lifetimes huge. And that's kind of what we're up against right now. But this full moon is so exuberantly magnificent, and then the moon itself is creating a pretty tight Yod to Pluto and Chiron. So we have the moon at 14 degrees Leo, opposite of course the sun at 14 degrees Aquarius, and then the moon is in conjunct Pluto at 14 degrees Capricorn. So there's nothing in common with that fixed fire sign of Leo and the cardinal earth sign of Pluto. Okay, now it's also in conjunct on the other side to Chiron, and Chiron is in Pisces at 15 degrees, so it's not exact to the same degree, but it's only a degree apart. And Chiron is an immutable water sign. Again, nothing in common between the mutable water and the fixed fire. So this pattern is interesting. Now, what is it bringing up? Well, on an emotional level, especially since the moon is coming up to being conjunct Jupiter pretty soon. And Jupiter retrograde in Leo is going to carry on this Yod for the next 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be very close, within a degree and 2 degrees on either side, beginning the day of when Mercury goes direct. Until then, it's a little bit further apart at 2 and 3 degrees. Granted, it never gets exact, but it gets very, very close. And just because Mercury is retrograde and Jupiter in Leo is retrograde, so we've got this retrograde energy anyway, and we've got this very, very close full moon Yod. There is something going on in the background, and it has to do with our ego identity and what we are wishing and wanting to create, and what's happened so far, where the wounds have been, where the disillusionments have been, where we've gotten stuck, where we haven't been willing to change negative patterns in order to move forward with what we want to move forward with. What is being set up for the next few weeks is this idea of, am I really willing to break through the negative patterns, whether they be health or relationships or work routines, habits, finances. In fact, finances will probably be huge on a collective and global level relative to this Yod. But, individually is what we're talking about here, because it's the changes that we each make that create the bigger change in the world. So, this is the opportunity, and where some of you will get incredibly brilliant insights, like the light of the full moon will shine upon those unconscious places that you've been keeping in the dark and saying, no, you can't, you've got to look at this, and this has got to change. And then when that changes, the amount of life force and creative energy that flows through, it's like, it's like a stuck hose. It's been unwound and clear channel. It's just like, oh, and it's powerful. So this Yod feels like one of the very big important energies that reflect how this year is a powerful manifestation for us in general. But you've got to have that clear pipeline so energy can flow through it in order to manifest clearly what you want. Now, what's being set up here is some illumination on why hasn't it happened so far. Have your dreams been unrealistic for the reality that we live in? Have your habits not been conducive to getting the results that you want? What else can I say? Have you had a lot of self-doubt? Do you just feel like you're not good enough? Have you not been willing to put in what's required in order to get where you want to get? Are you still nursing wounds? One of the things that Pluto's sextile Chiron right now collectively, which is the Pluto in Capricorn is now and has been sextile in Capricorn or Chiron, is some of the negative sides of Chiron in Pisces along with Neptune in Pisces is a noticeable increase among certain segments of the population towards just kind of going into this deeper trance than ever before. Not thinking, not really doing the research, being more than willing to just trance out with whoever's in charge or has the most say or power or whatever it wants, them to believe. But so a sextile, when it happens, it can happen again. All energy is just neutral and it happens one way or the other. Thing about a sextile is if you're paying attention, it can be like magic, manifestation magic. Just So if you get it and you see where the wounds are and you're really, really willing to break down the old conditioning patterns, wounds, Pisces, conditioning patterns, Pluto, Capricorn, it's like magic how it shifts. But on the other hand, if you're not paying attention and just sort of sitting around on your couch and not opening your mind and heart, anything can happen to you because of that same magical grace of ease of energy that the sextile brings. Hopefully that makes sense. Regardless, it's part of the Yod pattern because we have a focal point, which in this case with the new moon or full moon, it's the moon up here at the point, and then over here on one side we have Pluto, on the other side Chiron, and Pluto and Chiron are in this really magical sextile manifesting aspect to each other. The implied destiny inherent in this Yod is also difficult because we may have had a vision for ourselves or a sense that, it's gnawing at our consciousness, and the Yod seems like, but it's so hard and there's always something wrong, and maybe it's in crises or the timing's never right or something. And we can, with the Yod, create crises when we don't need to, or we can overanalyze by focusing on everything that's wrong and be really hard on ourselves. But it also holds on a fundamental level, on an archetypical level. It correlates with the Virgo archetype of getting better, making yourself better, working at purifying and getting better as a person. Today and tomorrow, the next day, this week, this full moon energy with Mercury retrograde, it's going to give us additional clues to look at that are really holding us back in terms of our creative gifts. So they might include a lot of things that have to do with the Leo archetype, like not being lovable enough, or the idea of conditional or unconditional love, or being stalled with your creative gifts, or worrying too much about what other people think, for example. You'll come up with your own. There's some important pieces to how to work with and resolve a Yod. One of them is to be conscious of the sextile piece of the pattern, not getting in a deeper trance, for example, but looking at the conditioning and the wounds and actually having an almost magical healing and transformation. Another way is, and an additional important point of a Yod, is to look at the midpoint between the two planets that are forming a sextile, or the midpoint opposite, which is opposite the focal planet. So in a full moon Yod, this is extra powerful because we actually have the sun at that midpoint between Chiron and Pisces opposite the moon. And the moon and the sun in their own ways each hold a portion of strong ego energy. So this full moon Yod has a lot of the stress and the relief built into the full moon aspect, but it will unfold and expand in understanding and consciousness over the course of the next few weeks, especially as Jupiter returns back to the point where the full moon is today at 14 degrees, which it will. So there's going to be several trigger points along the way, which I'll keep everybody updated on. But this 14-degree Aquarius point and 14-degree Leo, wherever that axis is in your chart, is where you can really notice where you're feeling still some crises and tension around matters of the limitations of creative expression, and also where the ego is still being bound. So one of the things is the inconjunct to Neptune is necessitating some understanding of, or the dissolving of, the ego's stronghold on certain ideas and beliefs that just are causing nothing but difficulties. And then on the other side, so that's the Chiron and the Pisces side. And then on the other side, we're looking at how can we build up our own structures that make more sense to us in our mind, what's real for us, but from a different perspective, from the perspective of maybe I had it all wrong, maybe I was thinking wrong, maybe society told me wrong, maybe now I have to re-engineer my thinking, I have to restructure my belief system. These are all things that could come into play with this Yod. But if these considerations are made, this is quite a magical time relative to it, like pushing through any blocks of the pipeline of your creative energy flow. So hopefully that made sense. I will sign off for now since it's getting so dark out. You're not going to be able to see me in a few minutes. All right. In a couple of weeks. Bye for now.